versus just ride. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a ride. We can change it any turn we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a ride. We can change it any turn we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. Up and down.
Greetings, programs. Welcome to Red Pill Sunday School. This is November the 4th, 2017. November the 4th. Why does that strike a bell? Oh, yeah. Today's the day that everything's supposed to go to hell because of organized terrorists and that group, I can't remember the name. And it just so happens that there is a nationwide EMP drill going on at the same exact time. Always a drill when something big is going to happen. So we'll see what happens. I'm pre-recording this because I'll be out of town, but I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Will something actually erupt out there in Twinkleland? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate either. Let's go back to our subject at hand, which we started last week, which was, a little bit about the history of the United States. History, first of all, has to be talked about, as we touched on last week. And I'm going to release a blog on this before I go. You can look for that at realityblogger.wordpress.com. Its title is A Matter of Time. A Matter of Time. And I figured out, folks, there's certain pillars that you reach. There's certain heights that you reach when you just continuously research and look and try to uncover every stone. And I know anybody out there that's had those epiphanies, those moments of pure and utter clarity. Not because you're reading something, but because suddenly it just hits you. And when it hits you so hard, it almost knocks you down. And now, all of a sudden, you can go verify everything that just hit you. You didn't think of it that way. Some new perspective comes to mind. Well, that's actually what has happened to me over the last couple weeks. It all started when I watched a video, actually, on Kurt Kellenbach's website. Someone sent me a link, and I watched a certain video about the Roman calendar versus the other calendar, which we'll talk a little bit about, and it struck me as something that I needed to look into, which was not necessarily the calendars themselves, but more the concept of time itself, who the timekeeper is, and what I figured out, amazingly. Because, last week we were reading the maxims that time doesn't affect the king. There's no statute of limitations upon the king or the sovereignty of the state. There is no time when it comes to the crime. They're immune from everything. Again, that is what sovereignty really is a state of lawlessness where you're ruling over other people. And this is, again, why no man is sovereign. The title, of course, the crown, has a sense of immortality or sovereignty to it. But, hey, men, they come and go. What really got me is that I truly figured out, just over the last few days here, that we're all stuck in the time domain. And that without time, no fiction would exist. There'd be no possibility for the fiction to even come alive or have any authority or power. Right? Without time, which is a construct of man, a language, a series of symbols and numbers to represent something passing, something past, or something future even, history. So what I realized is that without time, there would be no purpose to the legal realm. We say that God's realm, its nature, is timeless. Now, does that mean that the time doesn't pass? Don't read into it too much. Just think of it in the form of a language. Time, as it is recorded by man, is not the reality of time. It's a tiny speck of a very large and unknown entity, what we have recorded as time. But see, everything has to be registered. Your birth certificate is an event in time. It is based and built upon that single event. This is why They say it's not the cognomen or the family name, but the agnomen, named the status passed on by your father, which can be no higher than your father. And so your father, being an event himself, has issue to another event, and the event is recorded, it's time-stamped, it's got the date, and, I thought I'd let you people know out there, there's one thing on the birth certificate we haven't talked about, and that's religion, or caste. Which role you've been cast in the religious realm. Yes, that's right. Your parents are actually invited to inform on which religion you are. Now, you might say you're one thing or the another, but your official record, until changed, will stand. Now, why do I bring that up? Because there is a sudden increase, a sudden rash of people who are actually writing in and changing their birth certificate. They're insisting, of all things, on changing their religion to atheist. That's right. People are actually writing in, changing the religion on their birth certificate without really understanding why, how, or what that is doing, accomplishing, or harming, and they're putting atheist. Yeah, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing that these people who really have no idea why they're doing it are doing more than most of us who do know. You start a fad, you start a meme, and everybody starts following and not even conscious of their actions. It's amazing what we can do. Like robots, automatons. So we're all stuck in this time domain. Everything we do is recorded as an event in history, time. We're making history with everything we do. Every time we access the fiction, the name, the person, the place, the jurisdiction, the properties, whatever we do, there is a timestamp. I can go to my bank statement. I can find out down to the second what time some transaction happened. Right? I can... there's GPS now, and I'm sure that the GPS systems are tracking, like you've seen it, of course. It's tracking your movement. It leaves a trail of little dots, and every time you're at that dot, it's time stamping that you were there. You see, our whole history is turning into one big Google application. Google Earth. On Google Earth, what you don't see are the thousands and thousands of layers. That can be anything from, hey, pull up all churches. Hey, pull up all African Americans. Hey, pull up all this. Pull up all postal workers. Pull up anybody with this ID. Pull up anybody with this chip. And you've got it on Google Earth. It's a virtual world. A virtual world where every person, place, and thing has a point. The Internet of Things. You see, this is what is happening to us. That we're falling so far into the hourglass, into the simulation of the hourglass, into the time domain, where everything artificial exists, all the legal stuff exists. Think about it, of course. Without time, what did we say last time? Imagine you get a bill for something. Well, gosh, when do I pay it? I'm not going to pay you this. But see, in the natural law, that's a duty. In natural law, that would be a duty you would immediately want to pay someone back in whatever it was, hopefully not money. But, love, favor, charity, but you're not required to, but it's a duty. Here, you've got the contractual obligation. And see, a contract is what? It's based in time. You've got the birth of the contract and the death of the contract. You've got what's called the execution or life of the contract. You see, in the time domain, a contract lives. Those who contract have virtual lives. This is the time domain. This is our problem. This is where all legal things, all things of the artifice exist. Think about a cartoon. What is a cartoon but a bunch of pictures? And when you move those pictures fast enough, you suddenly get motion. And each one of those little pictures has a timestamp. See, that's what I work with in my profession. The timestamp. Ah, yes. And you can go frame by frame and you can see every single picture. And if you go frame by frame and you look slowly at every single picture, well, then you realize that cartoon doesn't actually have life. If I look up the life of the person, Clint Richardson, what do I find? Oh, look, he went to the Mexican restaurant here at 5:15 p.m. on Tuesday, according to his record, his bank account, and that timestamp. Oh, look, over here, he paid some bills. Oh, look, here we have him crossing this street light. Oh, the chip in his license plate says this and this. Oh, his cell phone tracking says this and this. And you have a series of lines and graphs and everything else that makes up your current history. Can't have history in the future, obviously, but you could have predictive programming. You could have predictive software that'll probably guess where you're going. In fact, today, I've noticed that some cars that have these navigation systems, they automatically say, hey, if you're going to work, looks like you are, you might want to take this new route. Wait, I didn't tell you I was going to work. How do you know I'm going to work? Well, because you go to work every morning at 8:30, it just knows. Just like when you're talking around your computer, which of course I do a lot of, it listens to me. And, if one time I was talking about finding meeting rooms, and since that day I've had the same damn ad for meeting rooms come up because I talked about it so much. I said the word meeting rooms so damn much, right? If I was to sit here and repeat the word crochet, gosh, I want to crochet. Gee, I wonder if there's a crochet store around. Hey, would you like to come crocheting? I guarantee that eventually my computer is going to start telling me about and showing me personalized ads because I've mentioned the word so much. Screw you, Da Vinci Meeting Rooms. I don't want your freaking business because you're a company that pays for internet searches and internet spying. Just, go away. This, all because my history says I'm looking for meeting rooms in the next 6 months. You see, we're on this Google Earth, on this digital globe, whether it's flat or not, doesn't matter. Wherever you are, on that flat surface or that round surface, whatever floats your frickin' boat, because it doesn't really matter at this point, does it? Here you have the life of the person, the civil life, the spiritual death and journey of Clint Richardson, the legal artificial structure, the straw man, and here he goes on his commercial journey from day to day. Everything time-stamped, everything there. And I'm probably the least connected person. Imagine what you people who are so connected to your phone and your everything, your GPS, man, your whole life is being mapped out. Everything you do say, I mean, geez, how many end-user agreements have you actually agreed to? How many times have you told Google, yes, baby, yes, go ahead, search my computer, take anything you want, share it all, it's okay, go ahead. It's in the end-user agreement, and I say yes, and therefore it's all yours. I don't need privacy. I'm on Google. No one needs privacy if they're on Google. Oh, gosh dang it, I just said Google more than 5 times, and therefore I'm probably going to get advertising for Google. Forgot what Google means or what it meant in the old language, but it was something about being an idiot. Google, to trick or to deceive or to cause an illusion. I can't remember. That's what the word Google actually means. And then it's a number, a Google. But, yeah, the old meaning, yeah, like trickery, basically deceit. That's what Google actually meant. I'll have to look it up one day. But let's not get too sidetracked here. I just wanted to bring that up, this notion of time, because it's one of the pinnacle pillars that you can reach in understanding and perceiving the legal realm, this matrix, if you will, because it's all based in time. Without time and the recording of it, there would be nothing. It would have no power. It would have no statutes of limitations. It would just have nothing. So there could be no beginning or end to anything without time. And the beauty and the most wonderful concept of all in the Bible is that notion of timelessness. That, yes, a man is mortal. Yes, absolutely, man is mortal, but he becomes immortal. through his lineage, through his passing of blood. It's a beautiful, beautiful concept. It's the eternity, if you will. To live eternally is not to have a beginning and an end, not to have a birth certificate and a death certificate, not to have the execution of a contract, but to live and to provide and cherish everything, because you know that your children are going to live, come in your footsteps, that their children will live and their children, and will continue and thrive because you did everything you could to follow and preserve their nature and the nature around them. You're oneness. You're in oneness. You're in harmony and law with nature. Such a beautiful concept. It's, it's sitting there rotting on the shelves of people because they refuse to read it for what it is. It's so sad. I'm so saddened by that thought alone, that the answer is sitting on everybody's bookshelf, or put in a closet, or in a storage shed, or in a hotel, or, well, of course it's everywhere. It has to be everywhere. It has to be openly accessible, because without the notion of the possibility of you accessing it, the fact that it's published and it's sitting there for you to read means that it's published, means that the system can operate because it has disclosed the law to you. It's your choice not to read it. It's your choice not to act in it because you haven't read it. It's your choice to absolutely hate it because you haven't read it, and because you've heard around the way it's not a good thing. Like seeing or not seeing a movie based on what a critic says. But I digress, because we're talking about history. History is, of course, the recording of the time domain. And just to be clear here, let's consider this for a moment. Now, somewhere we got off track in time, right? Somehow we got separated from the former timeline, right? So right, we're living in an alternate timeline. Did you realize that? Oh no, I'm not talking about these false paradigms and these controlled psychological operations that are going on. I don't mean that kind of alternative timeline. No. I mean the legal system that started at year zero. This timeline that began at year zero. That was actually a different year. You see, we have three systems. We have the before Christ and the after Christ, right? The Anno Domini, or AD, and the before Christ, or BC. And of course, that's the Julian and the Gregorian calendars, basically the Roman calendar. The medieval term Anno Domini means in the year of the Lord, sometimes mistranslated as in the year of our Lord. In this system that we're talking about, this other calendar, it starts at 1. And it goes, and it's in the year 5778. Perhaps you think that's the Masonic calendar, the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar. It's got a lot of names. But it tracks the AM, the Anno Mundi, which is Latin for in the year of the world. I won't even try to pronounce the Hebrew term for that. It is also the Hebrew version of that is from the creation of the world. So you know how they say the Bible, the real staunch Bible people, they're like, yeah, Earth is only 6,000 years old. Well, 5778 to be exactly, because the year 5778 on the quote-unquote Hebrew Anno Mundi, in the year of the world, you see, why do they say that? Because to them, this is the Babylonian creation story. So it's very difficult to not talk about this without going into all of the Amish and all the Babylonian creation mythology, which is actually what Genesis is a copy of. And it's very difficult not to talk about that while talking about this. So let's just trust me when I say the Babylonian calendar, my personal word for it. The year 5778 began at sunset on the 20th of September 2017 of the Roman calendar, will end on the 9th of September in 2018. So year 5778 began at sunset on the 20th of September. Okay? Ends on the 9th. Did you know that? Maybe you've heard that Masonically. Maybe you've heard that song, in the year 5559, right? But, otherwise you don't really hear about the Anno Mundi calendar. You don't hear about their true calendar, And I'm honest, I'll be honest, I can't go any farther and say anything more about this. I can see, though, that 2017 in their calendar happened, it seems like it happened 3,700 years ago, which means that we're all acting as historical characters, dead people, dead persons, right? In Mortmain, dead hands, in Cestacue, the dead trust, right? But I also noticed that the calendar starts, again, the biblical notion of the age of the beginning of the creation of the world, which, again, in my opinion, is talking about the legal world, like it's so hard to explain. But remember, the gods created the heavens and the earth. The gods, the Elohim, and only in the second chapter of Genesis did Jehovah come along, right? So it reads to me as the gods created the legal system. They created the before Christ and Anno Domini system. So we're in this Roman or Julian or Gregorian calendar while they're in a different timeline. Their timeline goes into, started way before ours and continues way after. In 3700, there was a new timeline that started at year 0. But how does anything start at 0? Because this one started at 1, right? But how does anything start at 0? In the beginning? Well, I guess, in the creation of the world, as opposed to in the year of our Lord, the creation of the world starts at 1, but the year of Christ starts at 0? Huh. How interesting. I can't really go farther than that. I just understand that we're in a history that is different than theirs. Ours is the public history, theirs is the private history. Right? A good way of looking at it. I don't know. I find this to be absolutely fascinating. I'll probably just have to do, a little more study on the Anno Mundi calendar. Maybe someone out there can send me some information on it. And maybe do an essay on it for me. Tell me why it is that we're in a different timeline. How is it that the Gregorian calendar got shifted over for some of us, and we were put on this alternative reality? Very interesting. Inquiring minds want to know. Do me that favor. I'm tired of researching. To end this little rant, I'd like to read from Chuang Tzu, where he explains the perfection of following the natural law in the timeless domain. He said, "No one paid any special attention to worthy men, nor did they single out the man of ability. Rulers were simply the highest branches of the tree, and the people were like deer in the woods. They were honest and righteous without realizing they were doing their duty. They loved each other and did not know that this was love of thy neighbor. They deceived no one, yet they did not know that they were men to be trusted. They were reliable and did not know that this was good faith. They lived freely together, giving and taking, and did not know that they were generous. For this reason, their deeds have not been narrated. They made no history." To live in the natural law, in other words, is a priceless, timeless time. This is not to say that there is no quote-unquote time. It is to say that the tracking, the history, the recording of it is false, is the cause of all of our problems. It is the cause of our characters, our reputations. It is the cause of our properties, our debts, our bills. It is everything. Time. Without time, there would be no thing. There would be no limitations. Appear on this date or be summarily punished. If it just said appear, or be punished, there's no limitation. There's no time. Okay, well, I'm just going to wait to the very end, or what I think is going to be the very end of my life, before I appear. Oh, sorry, I died before. I didn't expect to die this early at age 98. My bad. You see, it just doesn't work without time. Nothing can work in fiction without the time domain. Their deeds have not been narrated, they've not been recorded. They made no history. Because why? Because they didn't have a legal version of doing their duty, which is a contractual obligation. They just did it out of nature, because it's obvious that's what you're supposed to do. What we're doing is unnatural, and yet it feels right somehow. We all know it's wrong, but everybody else is doing it. They loved each other. They had no idea that was just a concept of love your neighbor. They didn't have a law. They only had the natural, instinctual, unwritten law of nature, which to even call it law is almost an insult to what it actually is. It is a lack of history. It is a lack of fiction, a lack of lies, a lack of the concept of value, of love of shiny things. It is it is an appreciation for all things equally. Wow. But instead, we have a bunch of machines. People are machines. The unconscious activity of a million machines must necessarily result in destruction and extermination. It is precisely in unconscious, involuntary manifestations that we see in society today that all evil lies. That's G.I. Gurdjieff in Search of the Miraculous. If you do not understand, cannot imagine all the results of this evil, you do not yet understand and cannot imagine the results of this evil that you people out there pretend. You who are walking with your cell phone in front of your face, about to fall off a frickin' cliff or run into a bus. But the time will come when you will understand. And I suppose that time will be when you no longer have the ability to put your phone away because it's in your frickin' head, plugged in. There's a guy named Alexis de Tocqueville, very interesting writer. He was in the 1800s, pre-Civil War 1800s. He's got one of my favorite quotes because he explains us to a T. He says, and this, of course, is all revolving around the notion of the history of the United States. Do you see what I'm about to read? Do you see that it happened already? Do you not see that whatever was is no longer what is when it comes to the United States? After having thus successfully taken each member of the community in its powerful grasp and fashioned him at will, the supreme power then extends its arm over the whole community. Yes, that's the central government, the federal government, the district, where the seat of government lies, that municipal corporation, where the sovereignty hides as a foreign corporation, a foreign entity to all other states. It covers the surface of society with a network of small, complicated rules, minute and uniform, i.e., Uniform Commercial Code, and the other hundreds of uniform laws that are passed in each state so that they don't have to pass them federally by a group of really, really evil attorneys, as if that's not an oxymoron, which the most original minds and the most energetic characters cannot penetrate. To rise above the crowd. The will of man is not shattered, but softened, bent, and guided. Men seldom forced by it to act, but they are constantly restrained from acting. Such a power does not destroy, but it prevents existence. It does not tyrannize, but it compresses, enervates, extinguishes, and ultimately stupefies a people, till each nation is reduced to nothing better than a flock of timid and industrious animals, of which the government is the shepherd. To put that in a biblical perspective, the Bible says be sheep. Now, Alex Jones and other shock jocks, they'll call you sheep as if it's a bad thing because, of course, they don't really understand or don't want you to understand the Bible. And so they call you, you call everybody else sheep when in fact you're supposed to be the sheep. You're supposed to be the flock that follows the shepherd who is Jesus Christ, right? The law of God personified as Christ. You're supposed to bring it into you and actually do it. See? But instead, you go to the story of the he-goat of goats. The he-goats of men, yes, where men act like goats, headstrong and stupid, yet arrogant, confident in their lack of knowledge, full of information, full of adversaria, knowledge that is meant to deceive, information, that is meant to take away from knowledge. Intelligence, not knowledge. And so, this is where we stand. We are we are people that have been so stupefied, just so absolutely not destroyed, but prevented from existing in our natural capacities, right? Prevents existence. We're not under tyranny, although democracy is the next step before last chance before tyranny. But it compresses, we're compressed, we're districted, which means distress and distraint and seizure. Yes, that's the meaning of district. Go look it up. District is another word for Caesar. What did Caesar want to do but register everyone? Tax is the proper term. Tax, but to be taxed, you have to be registered, right? That's why everybody must be a global citizen, so we can have a world tax for a world government empowered and protected by a world religion, which is in turn protected by a world military force, unlike anything you've ever seen or imagined. Yes. You see, that is the ultimate consequence of governments that are left to groups, monarchical, bloodline-related groups, families, as we decided, Jews, which is nothing more than what was it again? Not a race, not a religion, certainly. Just a bunch of psychopaths who get together and rule the world and pass their estate that they have gained, their lands and their land holdings, and, of course, us, onto their kin, onto their bloodline. Now, I want to start today in our little historical journey, although we're already 30 minutes in. I want to start by going to some of the more interesting court cases that I have collected. Let's start here. This is from several cases, and I'll name them as I go. The distinction between national and state citizenship and their respective privileges are drawn has come to be firmly established. And so it was held that the right of peaceable assembly for lawful purpose was not a right secured by the Constitution of the United States. Although it was said that the right existed before the adoption of the Constitution, an exemption from compulsory self-incrimination is a fundamental right inherent in state citizenship and is a privilege or immunity of that citizenship only. Okay, what is that saying, folks, in Walker versus Savinet, 92 U.S. 90? It's saying that the notion of peaceful assembly for lawful purpose falls under the doctrine of compulsory self-incrimination. The state citizen has the right to get together and talk with each other, the private citizen. The United States citizen, however, does not. Because this is a constitutional quote-unquote right, which means it's a negative right, which means it is telling you that the government cannot do something, not that you can. Those who have private rights, reserved rights, who are state citizens, thus are protected by this particular aspect of the Constitution. It goes on. It says, although it was said that the right existed before the adoption of the Constitution, an exemption from compulsory self-incrimination, meaning you met together and were caught, is a fundamental right inherent in all state citizenship and is a privilege or immunity of that citizenship only. It also says the right of trial by jury in civil cases guaranteed by the Seventh Amendment, and the right to bear arms guaranteed by the Second Amendment. In Presser versus Illinois, 116 U.S. 252-265, have been distinctly held not to be privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States guaranteed by the 14th Amendment against abridgment by the states. And in effect, the same decision was made in respect to the guarantee against prosecution except by indictment of a grand jury contained in the Fifth Amendment, which was Hurtado versus California, 110 U.S. 515, and in respect to the right to be confronted with witnesses contained in the Sixth Amendment, which is West versus Louisiana, 194 U.S. 258. In Maxwell versus Dow, Supra, where the plaintiff in error had been convicted in a state court of a felony upon an information. A felony upon an information, remember, a ticket is or is not an information, depending on whether it's informing you of a court case, a crime, right? So it's an information. When I got a warning ticket, it told me straight up, this is not an information. Therefore, I knew I wasn't informed, they can't be enforced. But an information is something enforceable. That's why they have to timestamp it and put a date on there and say, appear here. It's an information. A plaintiff in error had been convicted in a state court of a felony upon information, and by a jury of 8 persons it was held that the indictment, made indispensable by the Fifth Amendment, were not privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, as those words were used in the 14th Amendment. Now, what's going on? What is this whole 14th Amendment thing going on? What do you mean protected against the states? You see, this is what you don't understand. This is the big thing that people just haven't grasped yet. Now I'm going to pull up my favorite U.S. Code, Title 42, Section 1981. You know, I remember it was Hal Anthony, good old Hal, behind the woodshed, who actually turned me on to this first. And this probably was one of the most useful codes I've ever come across, because it's led to so many other important discoveries. It's just amazing. Right? Now, Title 42 is always your concept of Social Security and everything else. The public welfare system is always Title 42. Now, here you have your Statement of Equal Rights. We've said this before. All persons who within the jurisdiction of the United States, which includes when you're in the states, the private states, shall have the same right in every state and territory to make and enforce contracts, to sue, be parties to sue, be sued, give evidence, and to the full and equal benefit of laws and proceedings for the security of persons and property enjoyed by white citizens, and shall be subject to like punishment, pains, penalties, taxes, license, and exactions of every kind. So your Statement of Equal Rights, we're all equally bound under the sanctions that we shall be subject to like punishment, pains, penalties, taxes, licenses, and extortions, exactions, in other words, of any kind, and no other, and to no other. So what is this actually saying? Do you remember how it is that they verbalized the creation of a municipal corporation and what rights they give to those quote-unquote artificial persons? Corporations are artificial persons, right? Do you remember? They were given the right to contract and to sue and be sued, to be parties, give evidence, etc., right? You just need an agent, attorney. And so you find that, hey, you're a person, just like the municipal corporation is a person at law, and you have the same right in every state and territory to sue and be sued. Wait a minute, that's the same thing as a municipal. So you're saying that I'm equal with all persons. All persons are equal. Wait a minute. That includes corporations? Well, persons is defined as individuals, associations, corporations. Wait a minute. So I have equal rights under the law with even my city? which is just a municipal corporation, or i.e. person, and any person, or i.e. corporation, or association, or district, or anything else it creates, I have equal rights. I can sue and be sued by it. I should treat it as just another person. Does that seem strange to you? Why? You're in fiction. You're in a freaking cartoon created by a combination of Ted Bundy and, what, Andy Warhol. I mean, you're no drug could possibly create this. No CIA-backed fucking drug could ever create such a strange place as the legal fiction. And you're concerned that you're no different than a city? That you have the same rights as a city? That you can sue and be sued as a quote-unquote person? Why is that surprising? It's fiction! Do you think that the programmers of the Matrix can't make the Matrix look any way it wants? Or do anything it wants? Or create any status it wants? Do you really think that it's bound by anything? It's fiction! It's bound by the imagination of the gods that create it. The artistes who create, the devils that create the legal system. What makes you think there is any limitation to the king, to the sovereign? And this is important because guess what? You think that your municipal corporation is the sovereign government. It is not. It has nothing to do with sovereignty. Its sovereign is that which allowed it to be incorporated, which is the state. It doesn't have sovereign capacity. No city, and therefore no officer of a city, has sovereignty. Sovereign is the state. Just like if you're a private citizen, the state is your sovereign, and if you're a U.S. citizen, the corporation, the United States, is your sovereign. But to the United States, the corporation that's housed the seat of government in Washington, D.C., it has a sovereign too. It's called the people. You see, citizens don't have the rights guaranteed, the guarantees of the 10 Bill of Rights. They are for state citizens, i.e. we the people and our posterity. You see, you must get it out of your head that you are one of them and they are one of you. You must get it out of your head that Jews and Christians can live side by side. You must get it out of your head that your opposite, your adversary, is also yourself. Yes, to know yourself is to know your enemy, absolutely, because that's ignorance. A lot of times it's voluntary ignorance. But you must stop equating yourself to these quote-unquote people who created, first, the colonies. What is a colony defined as? A plantation or a farm where they can hold slaves. Secondly, the states, which are just colonies, which are still plantations and farms. But we've moved on from involuntary slavery into voluntary slavery according to the 13th Amendment, which makes room for the 14th Amendment, the feudal, contractually feudalized slave, one who volunteers to be in a performance debt slavery. You see, that is the purpose of the creation of the United States, the corporation, after the Civil War, to give all Negroes, as it says, a status, which, when you read the documents, what does it say? It says we are enfranchising the Negroes into the system. And remember, anybody who contracts with the United States in the District of Columbia is also its resident or inhabitant. What does that mean? Well, that's where Horace Greeley's quote comes in, which is actually, there's way more to that hopefully we'll get into sometime. Where he says that it wasn't that we elevated the slaves, it's that we lowered the common people, whatever your nature, your color, your blood, if it's not being tracked, right, to a common enfranchisement, a common freedom, a common wasteland, basically, common place for all slaves, all workers, all those employed or used. This is what the United States is. Why did the states then create these Bill of Rights? Why were they demanded afterwards as amendments, i.e. articles of the Constitution? Well, because they realized what was happening. They realized, holy shite, there's a bunch of psychopaths creating a new corporation. Creating what potentially will be an administrative nightmare. And sure enough, just a year or two after it was created, they had the Judicial Act. And suddenly, there was no more judicial to be spoken of. There was only what what the executive office of the judicial of the judicial extends to. There was no judicial branch happening. There was only the judicial department of the executive branch. That's what we're under. Everything is under the executive. Hardly anything comes out of the judicial anymore. There is no check and balance. There is no court for U.S. citizens that has anything to do with the judicial. Everything we operate under is under the executive. Why? Well, executive means military force. Who's your executive commander-in-chief, right? It's the governor, the president. It goes all the way down to the mayor. In the contracts of the municipal corporations, the mayors become basically, or the city managers, depending if it's that system, become the leader of the military occupation. That's how the system works, man. We're under completely the administrative system of the executive branch, where the judicial department is. Go pull up the judicial department, see what's in it. Everything's in it. The Bar Association is in the department of the executive office, not the judicial branch. No. What is in the judicial branch? Well, again, nothing for United States citizens. Because you're in a corporation. It's beneath. Congress is sovereign over the United States. The United States is sovereign over the District of Columbia and anyone who contracts with it. This is starting to make sense. I know there's so many onion layers to peel back, and it's really stinky the more you look at it, and the more you see how rotten it is. What did Patrick Henry say? He said in 1788, Orations of American Orators, he had something really interesting to say. He said, "My political curiosity, exclusive of my anxious solicitude for the public welfare, leads me to ask who authorized them," meaning the framers of the Constitution, "to speak the language of we, the people, instead of we, the states." Who authorized them, the framers of the Constitution, the founding fathers, to speak the language of we, the people, instead of we, the states? Who were the founding fathers? They were representatives of the states. This was a topic of hot debate. No, we should say people. No, we should say states. No, we should say people, we the states, in order to form a more perfect union. But you see, that's not what their goal was. That's not what this Masonic cult, every single one of the Masons, was. They weren't interested in creating an even better place. No. This was all about commerce. This was all about creating the commercial enterprise that is United States Incorporated. Not the United States of America. No. United States, the corporation that we read about last week. John Dickinson, who was a Delaware delegate in 1787, he said, "Let our government be like that of the solar system. Let the general government be like the sun, and the states the planets. Repelled, yet attracted, and the whole moving regularly and harmoniously in several orbits." Oh, the Earth is flat, so I can't take that seriously. I can't learn the moral lesson from that because I believe the Earth is flat, and therefore I don't accept that. Okay, again, you're a literalist. Take it metaphorically if you don't believe the fucking Earth is round. Let the general government be like the sun and the stars and the planets, repelled yet attracted, spinning around each other, always separate, is what it's saying, always private from one another. Do not let the federal, the central, don't have a standing army, which was the number one complaint in the Declaration of Independence. You know what George Washington said in his farewell address, September 19, 1796? Here's what he said. He said, "The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government, not the states, but the people, presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government." Now, who's he talking about? He's talking about everyone, but he's specifically talking about his people, not you, not the commoner. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. Does that sound like freedom? Do you not hear what he's saying here? He's saying that the people are the new God. The people is a God. The presupposition of God is to follow God's law, that you would follow God's law. The presupposition and the idea of the power and the right of the people as a God, as a single corporate entity to establish a government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. What was the purpose of establishing the government of quote-unquote United States? Well, obviously to have every individual obey the established secular government. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, so but let's go back to this here for a second. The framers of the Constitution, who gave them authority to speak this language, we the people, instead of we the states? See, this is the question that I kept asking. I kept asking because I understood that when the Constitution was signed, it was signed by the delegates of the state. And they put their name. And if I'm not mistaken, then they put the states, and weren't they listed according to state? So I always thought it was the states. And indeed, you look up the word state, it means people. People means state. People also means nation. People mean, it could be any people. What is people? You're defining the term by which geographical or legal jurisdiction you're putting it in. So here we have Patrick Henry, who was very, very dissenting. I quite enjoy some of his writing, saying, "Wait a minute, what's this we the people crap?" So you think that's a good thing. You think it's great. Until you realize someone finally tells you, hey, people is capitalized, that means it's not all people. If it were all people, then there would be no reason for the United States, because all people in the frickin' world would be part of it. So it has to be exclusive. You admit that much. Can't be any other country or nation. No, we hate them. Rah, 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 USA. No, so it must be the people that just happen to be here. Yeah, no. Most of those were indentured servants and slaves. And slavery was not made illegal by the Constitution, which tells you it's not a good thing. We the people instead of we the states. Why did they have... Why? Because the very thing that the states were created for, to be their own sovereign, independent things, countries, states, nations, kingdoms, well, you still had all this English common law and English this and English that. You still had the connections to the crown and all the debts to be paid to France and England and who else? I can't remember who else funded the war, right? So you had this group of people who were still Masons, still part of that whole thing, with one goal in mind, which eventually is world governance, right? And they get together. They decide that they're going to create a new form of government, not a strengthening of the actual union, but a new form of government. What? Wait a minute. So you still have the Union, and that is still operational. The Confederacy, as you will. Remember, Confederacy or Confederation means conspiracy, combination, or what's the other word? It means a plan between two or more people, right? Well, that's what a Confederacy is, right? Plan with two more people to do some harm. Well, it was harmful to take the lands of England and call them their own, so it was a conspiracy. There's no... You can't argue that. It's fact. It's not. I mean, just because you don't like the word or you think it's just the legal language. You learn not to have an emotion about it. You learn not to worry about what you think it should mean and recognize what it does. This is why it's so important to recognize what anarchy truly was meant to mean throughout history, not what this quote unquote movement says it means. Right? You got to understand how it should be applied in language. And of course, the whole purpose of nihilism is to destroy meaning. Right? There's nothing left in the anarchy movement. It's already been done. Right? There's no purpose in it anymore. The revolution's already happened. They failed. Right? All they're doing now in these movements are attacking even ever more the meanings and foundations of law and the words that make up that law. That is essentially what I see coming from the quote-unquote anarchy movement. It has no purpose. It really does not. It sells T-shirts. It is the subject of many tattoos. It's cult mind mentality. Sorry if that offends you, but anyone who calls themselves anything has a cult mind. If I call myself a Christian, I have a cult mind. If I call myself a Jew, if I call myself American, I have a cult mind. It's part of the culture. Don't be offended. Again, these are just words. Why is truth so offensive? And you know, one word here on Masonry as well. Don't get me wrong. You know, I had never even thought about or heard of Freemasonry except for when it. You know, I grew up in California, for God's sake. Right? I mean, talk about a wasteland. So, you know, Masonry out there was never a public thing. It wasn't just a known entity like similar to organized crime. It's just a known entity. You know who the gangsters are. You know, right? So you look like friends that I have from the East Coast, say Ohio, places like that, even where, you know, Mansfield and all those old oil or steel towns. It's like, you know, I talk about Masonry, and they're like, "What? What's the big deal about Masonry?" I don't understand. Where I'm from, anybody is a Mason. You don't do anything unless you're a Mason, right? So to some people, Masonry is just like, what? What's the big deal? Right? It's everywhere. Everybody knows that you're a Mason if you're a police officer or a judge in any kind of high power. That's how they get away with murder. Everybody knows that. What's the big deal, man? That's how they excuse themselves. That's their great secret. They don't have any secrets. It's the great secret. All it is organized crime. The judge says, hey, you're free because you're a fellow brother Mason. You gave me the sign. That's their big secret. It's just organized crime. That's all it's ever been. And that's all the United States was. Masonic crime being organized into a new government. I'm sorry, you know, am I being unpatriotic? You want patriotism? Yeah, you're going to have to go somewhere else, sorry. See, because the word patriot is one of those words I dissected, and I said, inquiring minds want to know. And you see, patriot, take the word apart, pat, riot. Pat means to be controlled, and riot, well, gee, that's an opposition. So when you really think of what a patriot is, controlled opposition, a pat riot. Damn. Gee. And, you know, oh, that's not what it means. Really? Are you a riot? And are you being controlled? Or are you out there in the streets with pitchforks and hammers and guns like you always pretend you're going to be? Right? Your little wet dream? No, I don't see it happening. So you're a controlled opposition, a pat riot, patriot. Oh, sorry, this is not freaking Patriot Radio. That's Fox News. What this is UCY TV, which I'm sure would love me to state at this point that my opinions are not its own. But then I'm not really giving you opinions as much as just trying to beat the truth into you. See, most of these things I'm reading. I'm not telling you my opinion. When I talk to you, I don't talk to you because I want you to know my opinion. I talk to you because I want you to know what a judge is going to tell you, what an agency with agents of governments are going to tell you. Not what I'm going to tell. It doesn't matter what I think. I'm a very, very tiny fish in a sea that will not allow me to go upstream. So, hey, there's plenty other places to go if you want to be catered to and be called a good patriot and gun owner and those little, you're such a good American. Oh, let me pat you on the back. Oh, see, you're your own version of snowflakes. Like a dog that just can't stand to be complimented with a treat. Oh, you're such a good American. Oh, you and your Second Amendment t-shirt have just changed the world. Oh, we love you. Oh, soldiers. Oh, let's get taboo. Let's get taboo here. Oh, you soldiers, you've done such good for this country. You've gone into countries that can't defend themselves, just beat the shit out of them. So that we can have peace at home, because they hate us. They hate our freedom, our franchise. And so we come up with slogans. The history of slogans. My God, it would be an interesting documentary to make about the propaganda that's ever come out about the military. My God. What was one? Support the troops, but don't support the war. But support the troops, don't support the war, however you say it. Well, let me ask you something, folks. You see, to anybody aware, that's a complete assault on reason. Support the troops, but not the war. Support the troops that are causing the freaking war, but don't support the war? Wait, how can war happen without troops? Can anybody explain this to me? How in the hell can a war happen without troops? Oh, but the troops are innocent. Wait, how can you be innocent if you're the thing causing something? Support the troops, but not the war. You see, that got shortened to just support the troops. Everybody forgot the unreasonable part. It's completely illogical, makes no sense whatsoever. And yet everybody around me is like, yeah, I support the troops, not the war. And then you hear the tagline, you hear it in the talk stream, mainstream media. You hear it on all the talking shows. You hear it in all the patriotism. Yeah, I support the war, I support the troops, but not the war. Wait, is that right? Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm supposed to say. Does that make sense to you? Really? Really? Let me break it apart. Any way you add it up, it amounts to bullshit. And the most interesting thing to do would be to make a documentary of all the bullshit that's come out to support a military that has won a standing army against the Declaration of Independence, and 2, that has been involved in 55 illegal occupations of different countries, etc., etc., etc. What were some of the other ones? A force for good. We're a force for good. Here we are with our big arsenal in the ocean, about to attack a country that has no navy because it's not on the ocean. But you see, we can fly our jets off our boats and bomb the hell out of them because they don't have an air force. That's good. Oh, support the troops. Wait a minute, the troops are flying the planes, the troops are dropping the bombs, but we're a force for good. What? Yeah, if you see, what we don't commonly do is remember that when they say we're a force for good, you got to remember that to evil thinks evil is good. We're a force for depopulation. Oh yeah, okay, well that's good, right? That is their version of good. We're a force for spreading nuclear radiated material on our weapons and therefore causing birth defects and more depopulation. That's because we're a force for good. Okay, that's good. Okay, great. We're going to drop napalm and burn everybody to a crisp in the forest and make sure nothing grows there for a few years. Trademark Monsanto. And, because we're a force for good. It's good to incinerate every life form in existence. It's good because we're a force for good. Really? Yeah. I buy that about as much as about support the troops and not the war. What a line of crap! I've just been told that once again I must state clearly that the opinions of the hosts are not necessarily the opinions of UCY.TV. Thank you very much. You can see I'm kind of in an ornery mood. So let's continue here. Let's continue with the quote-unquote history of the United States. Remember, the only true history is that which was written down as law, right? What else matters? Well, I care about the suit he was wearing or the pen he was using. Did it have black ink or blue ink? And did he sign? Well, no. All that matters is what came out of that freaking pen and onto paper and then into the digital system of prima facie law, illegitimate law. Right? Because remember, the United States is de facto, the Congress is, quote-unquote, well, after the Civil War, that all became mute, but Congress technically is the legitimate part of the United States of America. The United States, therefore, is the illegitimate or de facto. Right? The two go together. There's never a situation where you do not have de jure and de facto. Don't get me wrong. It's never de gratia, which is of grace, because that's only of God. But when you have de jure, which is of law, and you have de facto, which is illegitimate, so legitimate of law or illegitimate not of law, you have United States versus United States of America, right? Congress assembled versus United States Corporation. So, what you could say is the people. I want to read some more court cases here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have to go back to Title 42 of U.S. Code, Section 1981. I think we got through this, but I want to be clear on one more thing here, the difference between the states and the United States, and what that means for a citizen of the United States that resides in a state, but whose domicile is still the United States. So in other words, you're in interstate commerce. Even though you live in the state, your jurisdiction is the United States, so you're a foreigner, therefore you're under interstate commerce. So all your laws come federally. In other words, the federal government is your sovereign. Federal government is the creator of persons. The state is a third party to you, while the government is a third party to the state. All acting through the agent. It would be like if I was a contractor, say a carpet layer from, I'm going to be a carpenter like Christ. I'm a carpenter from Washington, D.C., which is foreign to California, so I go to California as an agent of, an employee of Washington, D.C. I contract with this third party, this foreign entity called California, even though I live there, and then I go back to Washington, D.C. See, the agent is always the same, but to these other things, California Corporation and United States Corporation, they're third parties to each other. So the United States is my principal, the state is third party in all transactions. And see, why is that important to understand? Why is that agency relationship so important to understand? Because remember, on the monopoly board, all the properties are owned, they're private, and when you step on them, you pay a fee or get exacted or shot or whatever, right? You can only go on the public lands of the United States, which are federal areas in the states, controlled by United States jurisdiction, the common areas. All right? And I think next week I'm going to do an essay on that, so you understand the difference between private lands and public lands, government, U.S. lands. After that Bundy Ranch incident, so many fallacies came out about land, and it's all crap. Those people didn't have any rights. So, they're U.S. citizens, you fools. They have a corporation in the United States. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? And they go against the United States. One of the United States' properties, its corporations, its persons, goes against it. How can it be that stupid? Anyway, I know why, because the truth movement, the patriot movement, has despoiled everybody's minds, and nobody quite gets it all. I don't get it all, of course, but boy, do I see the fallacies. Boy, do I connect the dots here. After all this work, all this study, and all this stuff I've done, make and enforce contracts defined. For the purposes of this section, is U.S. Code Title 42, Section 1981. For the purposes of this section, the term make and enforce contracts includes the making, performance, modification, and termination of contracts, and the enjoyment of all benefits, privileges, terms, and conditions of the contractual relationship. So it's just bestowed the right onto you, the equal right to all persons to make and enforce contracts, which goes along with the right to be sued and sue. All persons. Protection against impairment, and this is the part that I really want you to listen to, because this is the part that just isn't clear. I want to make it clear so that you know at all times where you are, what jurisdiction you're in, and who it is that you're dealing with as a foreign third-party entity. Remember, the United States is your principal. You are its agent. The state you reside in as a United States citizen is your third party. It is who you contract with. You don't contract with government. Your citizenship is a contract. It's an agency, and you're surety. But you have the right to contract as a person of the United States, property of the United States, with third parties, which is why the public governments of the states were set up in the first place, to handle the many U.S. citizens, i.e. the commoners, the goyim, whatever you want to call yourself, the peons, the working class, not or non-elite, not the people and their posterity, not the private landholders, which not the state, right? So this has to be clear so that you always understand who your side is and who your enemy is, or who your adversary is, the third party that you're contracting with, right? Make no mistake, a contract is always with someone that's adversarial. Otherwise, you wouldn't need the contract. If you agreed on everything, you're going to shake hands and be on with it. But you see, you make a contract because you know you can't trust men who've been corrupted by mammon. You can't. That's why you need no contracts, no words, no papers, no oaths. in and under God's law of nature. You don't need it. A man's word is his promise to God. To break a promise to God is the ultimate sin. No contract, no legal anything, no insurance. And so, this is the most important part right here. Title 42, Section 1981. Last thing it says is that these equal rights, including the right to be subject to punishment, pains, penalties, taxes, license, and extortions, right? These rights, including the right to make contracts, make and enforce your performance debt, and the right to contract, be sued, be parties, give evidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, the equal right and full punishment of the law, equally, amongst all persons. It says the protection against impairment. The rights protected by this section are protected against impairment by non-governmental discrimination and impairment under color of state law. Now you remember, states are quasi-sovereign. They are sovereign up to the point that they had given up something to the United States, i.e. the public lands are a good example, which is something we will get into next week. Explain what public lands really are. And why they are just sitting there waiting for you, as a private citizen of a state, to take them. What do you think the purpose of the Bureau of Land Management is? This is all land ready to be taken, but see, nobody's responsible. Nobody's everybody's caught up in the United States. You can't be a landholder in the United States. So that's why they're called federal lands. This is so important, folks. Your right to be put in pain, punished, taxed, licensed, and extorted cannot be interfered with by state law. Your right to be harmed and just absolutely harassed by the IRS, by the CIA, and whoever's doing it nowadays, the NSA. Your right to be completely and utterly controlled and manipulated and forced to do things that no man should ever do cannot be impaired by state law. Are you starting to see the problem here? Are you starting to understand the difference between a federal citizen, a United States citizenship, and a state citizenship? Now, inversely, the state citizen is protected against everything we're talking about here because a state citizen is not a United States citizen. Only United States citizens can be legally and rightfully, according to contracts, according to the very U.S. code they agree to tacitly, to be put in pain, punished, taxed, licensed, and extorted. Now, you're going to find the same thing said in the 14th Amendment. That everything the 14th Amendment says cannot be, the United States cannot be. What it's basically telling you, folks, if this isn't clear yet, all it's saying is that you cannot find sanctuary in the state that you live. That the federal law always trumps state law. You cannot hide in a state for asylum. You cannot do anything because you're operating as a United States citizen. You cannot constantly use a driver's license and everything and voter registration where you say I'm a United States citizen. You cannot constantly do these things. Ignorant as you may be that you're even doing them, doesn't matter to them. You're doing it anyway. Right? You can't keep doing these things and say that you're not bound by United States law or that the state law will somehow protect you, the state court. You got to get over the romanticism about what these states are if you're not one of the people of the states. If you are not a private citizen, that romanticism has to go whoop, right out the window with your frickin' idiotic patriotism. Why? Because you're not the United States of America. You're in a corporation, a matrix created to hold you in a feudal state according to a voluntary contract as an agency in a third-party relationship. Can I make it any clearer? I don't know, maybe. But what I want you to know before we move on is that United States citizens have no rights to be protected by the states. Do not ever look to the state to protect you. You are a foreigner under a foreign law. Now, does that mean you don't have to follow state laws while you're there? Absolutely not. Nope, you're absolutely required as a citizen of the United States to follow the local law of wherever you visit. Whatever country, under the law of nations, etc. Right? And that includes the states. Of course, you can be pretty rest assured that you'll find equal rights in every state if you're a federal citizen, especially, but also because all states, the rule about states' rights being shared and on equal footing, etc. Doesn't count for everything, but, still got the pot smoking rules and that. Remember, the federal law is, how do I say this? You're a United States citizen. You vote in a state election to make pot legal. That does not make it legal for a United States citizen to smoke pot in the United States, the corporation, the jurisdiction. This is why they can still crack down on you at any time. You are not smoking marijuana lawfully. You're smoking it with a license from the state, which offends the United States law. The only reason that they're not coming after you is because they've said they're not going to. That's it. That doesn't mean they can't. Doesn't mean you've won any battle at all, because you're not freaking citizens of the state. Do you think it matters that you have a state license that says you can medically smoke marijuana when you're a United States citizen and under United States law is your sovereign law? It's the law of the land, and the state constitutions recognize that. They say it right in it. Do you think that you're actually protected from the federal government by having a state license when you're a foreigner in that state? That would be, why don't you get a license from China? It would be the same thing. It's a foreign state. You think the United States is going to recognize a license from, say, Russia any more than it will the state of California? Well, maybe if it says, well, we're at a turning point. We're causing our own organized revolution where we'll be the makers of Monsanto double helix marijuana, and it'll be the only kind you can get, and it won't be able to connect to your body and have any health benefits anymore because we've genetically modified it. Right? We're gonna sell it. We're just gonna make people high and basically do no medical good anymore because we've completely outlawed the regular plant by calling it legal, but only to sell certain types of patented plants from our pension fund supported company here called Monsanto or whoever. You see, this notion of protection against impairment, man, I just don't. Do you get it? I know you feel really confident, man. Maybe you have pounds of marijuana in your home because it's legal in California. But remember where you are. You fictional fool. You are in United States corporation, jurisdiction, the district. You are not in California. What is a license? Remember, what license is a synonym, look it up yourself, a synonym for anarchy. License means, in its simplest terms, the ability to break the law. License means it is legal to do something illegal for others. It is a special privilege. It is permission to do something unlawful. Permission to do something illegal. That's all it is. That's why it's a synonym for anarchy. It's lawlessness. But I want to make sure that you understand this. The rights protected by this section are protected against impairment by non-governmental discrimination and impairment under color of state law. Go to the 14th Amendment, read about the same thing. You'll understand that the state cannot protect you, no matter what license it issues you, no matter what it tells you. The United States law and its court decisions are the law of the land. It's in the state constitutions. Do not be a fool. That's all I can tell you. Whatever you're collecting that you think is legal because the state says it is, and the federal government says it's not, trust me or not, I'm reading right from the law. You do whatever you want, but you better think twice about the difference between the law of the land and the law of a foreign corporation you're living in as an agent, a guest. You really better think about it, because I can see that as being the great infiltration of knocks on everybody's door. Hey, you're breaking federal law. But I live in this California. Well, it's federal law of the land, sorry. Due process of law. That's what law of the land is defined as. Due process of law. Court decisions, right? Due process of law. That's all it means. It's not romantic. It doesn't have anything to do with actual land, you fools. It's Due process of law. That's what it means. But it's flatteringly titled as the law of the land, which just sounds so romantic, doesn't it? It's like the land comes alive and gives us the legal system. No, don't confuse. Don't get confused between legal and natural. There is no land. There are no men. There's nothing living in this alternative timeline of history where dead people roam the earth in false personas, masks, with their false flattering titles, living spiritually dead lives according to the civil or law of the dead. What sucks? What sucks is that I get it. I can see the whole damn picture. It's like a chessboard. You can see 20 moves ahead. But how do you communicate this stuff, man? How do you possibly put all these dots in this massive connected dot puzzle into one show? How do you possibly not have to go back 20 steps every time you say something to talk about? This is impossible. That's why, it's the reason why I guess I decided to write it down. Okay. Point taken. You have no protection under state law. You are a United States citizen. Again, start acting as what you are portraying yourself as. Start acting as what you appear. Because if you try to act as if you're something out you're not, well, it's going to harm you. And there's no state law that's going to help you. Now, state law will help you if there is no federal law. Don't get me wrong. There's certainly things in the state that are beneficial to its visiting foreigners, United States citizens, but that law has to be non-federal or not against federal law for it to have any effect, right? And, of course, certain states have different laws to attract different types of quote-unquote persons, individuals, United States citizens acting an agency with states as their third parties. Okay, makes sense. This is commerce. This is why they created the United States, to regulate all interstate commerce. And, of course, it wouldn't be profitable unless they made every transaction somehow interstate, where no matter where you were in the States, you're always a foreigner. That makes perfect sense. Sounds like a typical banker idea. It's actually really logical and really not a surprise, not such a mystery after all, right? It's pretty simple. You want to extort everybody, you want to tax everybody, make them all foreign. Make them uneligible for land, make them uneligible for privacy, stick them in the time domain, put them on an alternative course, an alternative reality, an alternative fictional realm where they have no idea what they're doing, no idea where they're going. They're expanding into basically their own death, using our system of money where we're just raking in the profits every day. Geez, what a brilliant system. It's again, there's no mystery behind it anymore. It's just so obvious. I used to have emotional response about it, but at this point I'm just as the Bible says, with the acquirement of knowledge also comes the acquirement of great sorrow. And I can attest that is such a true statement. And that you really have to keep yourself. I think if I wouldn't have found the Bible, if I wouldn't have found the words, the meanings within, I don't think I would have kept going. I already quit once. Said I was going to write. I quit twice, actually. So I don't know what to say. I'm rambling, so I'll get back to the subject at hand. So that we are now hopefully absolutely clear, though, that there is a difference between, and one is not similar or the same to the other, a U.S. citizen of the corporation, housed in the municipal corporation called District of Columbia, the seat of government that Congress created and is sovereign over, and operates as members of the ethics committees, which basically means employees. They created themselves jobs. They created Congress, created the entirety of the U.S. Code, which includes the president, the Congress, etc., right? So the judicial create everything into the executive branch of the United States corporation, and nothing left in the check and balance of the judicial except maybe the Supreme Court, which I'm not even sure that would be an accurate statement at this point. So I'll leave that one as a cliffhanger. Let's go back to some of these court cases, because now we can understand. Again, my political curiosity, exclusive of my anxious solicitude for the public welfare, leads me to ask, who authorized them, the fathers, the framers of the Constitution, to speak the language of we the people instead of we the states? Well, again, they created a slave colony, one big corporate structure for the protection of slave owners and landholders. So, where do we go from here? Oh, this is good. This was an act to provide for care and preservation of the work constructed by United States. Okay, listen to that. An act to provide for the care and preservation of the works constructed by the United States for bringing the Potomac water into the cities of Washington and Georgetown. So there's a difference between the United States and Washington and Georgetown for the supply of said water, etc., etc., etc. So how did they say this? Now, again, Corporation Nation, folks. Why did I call it the Corporation Nation? I'm going to read this to you. I'm just going to skip around and read the important parts here. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. Now, notice here, be it enacted by the states of America in Congress assembled. The Congress is there representing the sovereign states as a union. This is the legitimate government meeting. Although it is right before or right after the Civil War, somewhere around there. And this is the beginning of changing Washington, D.C., of course, into its own district, its own foreign entity outside of all states, and, of course, creating then the seat of government, the United States Corporation, etc., etc. So, be it enacted by the Congress assembled, that in addition to the powers conferred upon the Corporation of Washington, again, the Corporation of Washington, by the second and third sections of the Act of Congress approved March 3, 1859, an act to provide for works, waterworks, etc., 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 full power and authority are hereby given to the said corporation to levy and collect a water tax on all real property within the corporate limits of the city of Washington, which binds on or touches any avenue, street, or alley in which a main water pipe has been laid or hereafter may be laid by the United States or by the Corporation of Washington. No, it's not a corporation. So I read this just for that purpose, because this is the words of Congress. This is not Clint saying this or playing ad libs. No, nothing like that. No, this is how they worded it, and the whole thing keeps referring to the corporation. Now remember, that's referring to the Corporation of Washington, which is a municipal corporation. Where is the United States? The seat of government. Where is it? Remember, Washington, D.C. became its own single district and was there and was ceded the lands from the states. It is outside of the United States. The states united, I should say. It is not touching, or not I should say it's not overlapping in its 10 miles square anything that is a state. It is its own private, i.e. foreign entity. Where, then, is, my friends, the United States? As we read last week. Correct answer? The United States is in a foreign corporation located outside of the 50 states of the Union. What does that mean? It means these guys literally created an offshore corporation and made it the seat of government. Do you get that? Do you see that? Do you understand? We create an island, a city upon the hill. We make it the seat of government inside a corporation, a municipal corporation, and we rule from that foreign place. We extend our jurisdiction through purchase and through conquering the states. We, with our standing army, we force them into new constitutions, new compacts. We create federal areas through the Buck Act. We call them the public lands, public places, etc., which are federal lands. We force the states, before they sign the constitutions, to include the new enabling acts, which say that we give up the right to all public lands. As the state, the people, the state, we give up the right to all public lands. If you pull up enabling acts, you'll see that in every constitution after the Civil War. Which is why, and we'll cover this next week, which is again why it is that the United States is holding so much of the public lands that are what you think are parts of the states, but in fact in the Constitution and of course the enabling acts, which allowed the Constitution to be created by the United States, we said, okay, part of this is that we have to agree to give up all public lands, and that's in some states that's more than half of the land. Nevada, for instance, I can't remember the numbers, 30-something% or whatever it is, 14% in like California, etc., etc. Utah is something like some crazy number, 80%. So it's all federally controlled land, and the state has no authority upon it. Which means when you're on that land, your authority is the United States or any rule that the state has made that is not in competition or against United States law. It is so important to know at all times where you are and not to let romanticism and history blind you to the truth. Well, that is the truth of the fiction, the truth of your person or status, your straw man. Do not allow yourself to be blinded by these false histories, this patriotism, and much of this quote-unquote truth movement that, again, is parroting and reparroting and parroting more and more of what has been parroted for 40 years now, to no avail. Why? Because the foundations, most of them are incorrect. And if you do not have the foundation, if you don't have the knowledge of these things, then how can you possibly ever get anywhere? I get asked all the time by people, is the truth movement just entirely a controlled op? I gotta be honest, I trust very few people. I do not listen anymore to the radio. I do not listen to other people anymore. When I listen to the news or when I listen to a radio show, I sit there and I count off how many things are incorrect that I can prove by just pulling up a damn legal dictionary or the U.S. Code. Or even the Constitution, for that matter. I mean, I just can't. I can't listen. I can't hear the ridiculousness of patriotism anymore, of the Pat Riot, the controlled opposition, because they've been brainwashed. And the single thing that keeps them pat, keeps them controlled, is that they think that they are the people. We have all been conditioned to think that we are the quote-unquote people. We the people. And nothing could be farther than the truth. And that's what I'm trying to teach. You don't have to think of this as good or bad. It's just the truth. Truth isn't good or bad. It's just truth. And again, it's hard to say what is truth when you're in such a bizarre wonderland as the fictional realm. I get it. You can only go by what's written. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to source. I'm trying to give you source. They keep going. And they talk about the corporation, the ordinance of the corporation, etc., etc. So I just wanted to pass that on because that's how they talked about it. They didn't fool themselves. They never tried to keep it secret, the notion that a government is a corporation. It's right in the congressional record. March 3rd, 1863, I think it's supposed to be 1869. I'm sure I messed that up. Chapter 84, volume 11, page 485, chapter CIX, an act amended. This is the 37th Congress, session 3, chapter 108, 109, 1863, excuse me. Okay? An act, a mandatory of an act entitled an act to provide for care and preservation of the works constructed by the United States. Corporation, corporation, corporation. See, that's how they talked. It wasn't a secret. We didn't have a dumbed down people. All right, let's see. I keep saying I'm going to go to these other court cases here, but I keep getting distracted. Okay, so we decided the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the right to bear arms is not guaranteed according to these court cases. etc. The Sixth Amendment, in respect to the right to be confronted with witnesses contained in the Sixth Amendment, nope. The respect against prosecution except by indictment of a grand jury contained in the Fifth Amendment in Hurtado versus California, 110 U.S. 115. And Maxwell versus Dow Supra, we talked about that. Fifth Amendment, he was not protected by the 15th Amendment, were not privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, as those words were used in the 14th Amendment. Again, referring to the 14th Amendment citizenship, which again says the state has no right to protect United States citizens from United States law. The decision rested upon the ground that this clause in the 14th Amendment did not forbid the states to abridge the personal rights enumerated in the first 8 amendments, because these rights were not within the meaning of the clause privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. We conclude, therefore, that the exemption from compulsory self-incrimination is not a privilege or immunity of national citizenship guaranteed by this clause of the 14th Amendment against abridgment by the states. In other words, the first 10 amendments, all amendments, the whole Constitution does not apply to United States citizens. It is the creator of them, therefore it is not restrained by them in any way. Does that not make sense? Property cannot be its own master. And it says, it is possible that some of the personal rights safeguarded by the first 8 amendments against national action may also be safeguarded against state action. In other words, federal law trumps state law, because a denial of them would be a denial of quote-unquote due process of law, i.e. law of the land, the Constitution. If this is so, it is not because these rights are enumerated in the first 8 amendments, but because they are of such a nature that they are included in the conception of due process of law, common law, etc. So you see that the Constitution does not apply to you. If it does apply to you, if something in the Constitution applies to you, it's because it's written elsewhere, not because it comes from the Constitution. It might be self-evident. It might be a part of what they consider due process, i.e. law of the land. It might be a lot of different things. But it's not the Constitution. The Constitution only protects those who have reserved all their rights, which are foreigners, not domestics. Remember, the United States has the right to protect itself against its own people, which is we, the domestics. Let's see. We agree that there are privileges and immunities belonging to citizens of the United States in that relation and character, in other words, according to the 14th Amendment, and that it is these and these alone which a state is forbidden to abridge. You see there? The governments of the United States, and each of the several states, several meaning foreign, are distinct from one another. The governments of the United States and each of the several states are distinct from one another. The rights of a citizen under one may be quite different from those which he has under the other. Do you have rights by the state? Yes. Do you have rights given by the United States? Well, they're forced upon you, and yes. Does a right of the state give you the power to ignore a right of the United States that's forced upon you? No. You must remember the United States trumps for U.S. citizens. This is a bad thing. I want to remind you, these are not good things, right? They are things that you've been trained to believe are good because you didn't know your status. You're trained to be patriotic. You're trained to have Stockholm Syndrome over that which has kidnapped you and cheated you out of every ounce of your family's property. Well, remember, the only true property you have is your child, your blood. And it is your duty to recognize private property, not a legal obligation, but a duty under natural law. You don't call it property, per se. You just call it what's right. I don't know how to explain it. If you don't get it, it's a negative right. I don't have the right to mess with you if you've claimed some land. Okay, it is quite clear, the court declared. The observation of the court in the United States versus Cruikshank, 92 U.S. 542, That the right of assembly was not secured against state action by the Constitution must be attributed to the decision in the slaughterhouse cases that only privileges and immunities peculiar to United States citizenship were secured by the Privileges and Immunities Clause, and to the and to the further fact that at the time it had not been decided that that right was one protected by the due process of law. Goes into this case, Corfield versus Coriel, 4 Washington, C.C. 371, etc. The privilege or immunity asserted in the slaughterhouse cases was the freedom to pursue a common business or calling alleged to have been infringed by the state monopoly statute. It should not be forgotten that the court, in deciding the case, did not deny the contention of the dissenting justices. Remember, the dissenting opinion is just as powerful as the good opinion. The bad opinion is equally as legitimate and can be used in any other case. Did not deny the contention of the dissenting justices that the asserted freedom was in fact infringed by state laws. So the judge did not disagree that there was an infringement by state laws. It rested its decision rather on the ground that the immunity claimed was not one belonging to persons by virtue of their citizenship. You cannot claim immunity to state laws because you're a United States citizen unless that state law is against the Constitution and laws of the United States, is what it's trying to say. It is quite clear, the court declared, page 74, that there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other and which depend on different characteristics in the individual, i.e. your blood, your plus knowledge, and it held that the protection of the Privileges and Immunities Clause did not extend to those fundamental rights attached to state citizenship, which are particularly the creation and concern of the state governments. You don't get that. You're in United States citizenship. And which Mr. Justice Washington, in that case I just mentioned, mistakenly thought to be guaranteed. The privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, it was pointed out, are confined to the limited class of interest growing out of the relationship between the citizen and national government created by the Constitution and federal laws. How was the citizen created? What was it created by? The Constitution and federal laws. That limitation, what was the national government created by? The Constitution and federal laws. What's the national government? United States. Where is it? In a foreign corporation, a municipal corporation called Washington, D.C. Where do citizens exist of the United States? Well, only where the United States extends its jurisdiction on public lands, public places, i.e. the Buck Act. That limitation upon the operation of the Privileges and Immunities Clause has not been relaxed by any other decisions of this court. This court case goes on. After the adoption of the 13th Amendment, a bill, which became the first Civil Rights Act, was introduced in the 39th Congress, the major purpose of which was to secure the recently freed Negroes, all the civil rights secured to white men, none other than citizens of the United States were within the provision of the Act. Okay? This Civil Rights Act did not apply to state citizens. They don't need it. They're not civilly challenged as we are. There can be no doubt that the civil rights sometimes described as fundamental and inalienable, which before the war amendments were enjoyed by state citizenship and protected by state government, were left untouched by this clause of the 14th Amendment. Didn't affect states. See, it's federal. It's foreign. It's a foreign law. State citizens are not United States citizens, and vice versa. It is quite clear, then, that there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other and which depend upon different characteristics or circumstances in the individual. Slaughterhouse cases. On the other hand, from Jones versus Alfred H. Mayer Company, 1967, on the other hand, there is a significant historical fact in all of this. Clearly, one of the purposes of the 13th and 14th Amendments and of the 1866 Act and Section 1982 was to give the Negro citizenship. What is a Negro? Well, it's a black dude. No, it's someone who has more than a quarter of their blood that is, quote-unquote, African-American, whatever, black, whatever the word is, I don't know. But Negro is a tainture of the blood. In other words, one that is not considered a white person. That's all it means. U.S. citizens are not considered as private citizens or white persons. That's what it means. The rights of citizens of the state as such are not under consideration in the 14th Amendment. They stand as they did before the adoption of the 14th Amendment and are fully guaranteed by other provisions. That's from U.S. versus Anthony, 24 Federal Case 829-830 from 1873. Back in 1873, they're telling you, this did not affect the rights of citizens of any state, only the common workers who were not eligible to be landholders, private, etc. The amendment reversed and annulled the original policy of the Constitution, which left it to each state to decide exclusively for itself whether slavery should or should not exist as a local institution, and what disabilities should attach to those of the servile race within its limits. The whites needed no relief or protection, and they are practically unaffected by the amendment. That is, unless they contract into it at birth through their ignorant parents. That's U.S. versus Rhodes, 27 Federal Case 785-794 from 1866. What is this saying? Pay attention here, folks. Left it to each state, originally, to decide exclusively whether it wanted slavery or not in its local institution. So what does that mean that specifically the 13th Amendment did? What does it say? That involuntary servitude and involuntary slavery shall not be allowed in any state or nation or the nation. Except in cases where one is convicted of felony. See, I explained this before. Birth essentially makes you a felon. You become an inmate. Again, all these things have to do with citizen. Citizenship is a performance debt in an open-air debtor's prison, essentially. So, too much to describe at this point. So the whites, they needed no relief or protection. They didn't need the 14th Amendment. It gave Negroes a citizenship, not a blood right, because the blood is tainted. It's blackened, i.e. Negro, the Spanish Latin term, I believe. All right, so. Oh, could you hear what Clint said? I didn't say it, folks. The law says it. History. I'm reading. I'm not saying anything. I'm not giving you my opinion. So they took the right of the way from the states to hold slaves and put it into the United States, the corporation. You see? They constituted it illegal in the states to have local slavery, and they made it national. They nationalized slavery. They made it voluntary. You didn't necessarily have to become a United States citizen. And all it really meant is that they put a status on you, a person, right? And suddenly you were property of the United States, so that if someone now harmed you or hung you from a tree, they weren't just hanging some random Negro, some random person without status, right, that couldn't be held accountable if you killed them. Now they were harming and possibly killing United States property. You see, they were killing United States slaves. They're voluntary slaves now. Because, for God's sake, after you get freed from enslavement, of course, you'd want to be enfranchised into a citizenship, right? But what else could you do? For God's sake, you'd be in a horrible situation. And that's how basically the 14th Amendment, for all intents and purposes, created the class of Negroes that you see in all the movies where the white people are so freaking evil and all the black people are their servants. Well, that is what the 14th Amendment really created. Voluntary servitude. Voluntary slavery. That is what the 13th Amendment created. The 14th Amendment then created the status that would fall under. The name. United States citizen. That didn't exist before. There was no United States citizen before that. Not in the term of being a quote-unquote national citizen. There was only state citizenship. So here again, it says, when we talk about freeing the slaves, we mean the freedom of the slave race. Right? What is that saying? the freedom of the slave race, it still considers it a slave race. It didn't stop calling it a slave race. We mean the freedom, i.e. enfranchisement into the United States from private to public hands, in other words, to make it a corporation of slaves. We mean the freedom of the slave race, the security and firm establishment of that freedom, i.e. franchise status, free slave, they call it, and the protection of the newly made freemen and citizens from the oppression of those who had formerly exercised unlimited dominion over him. What does that mean? Hey, United States just stepped in as your organized crime circuit. We took over all your Negroes. We took them away from you. Right? They're not working on your plantations for free no more. You want to hire this Negro, you're going to have to pay us some taxes over here in the United States so we can grow way out of control and someday dominate you and make you pay taxes. You see? We're going to steal your children's land, by the way. You see, they created, I should say they continued at calling it the slave race. Right? They didn't become white persons just because they became United States citizens. They continued to be the slave race, according to these psychopaths that created this slave colony in the first place, that continued it after the Constitution, and then transferred it slowly, incrementally, and finally by the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, after the Civil War, into a nice enterprise corporation located in a foreign district. You know, it's a really incredible history when you see it for what it is. But don't make any mistake that this was the creation of a corporation that not only supported slavery, but later enfranchised slaves into its quote-unquote citizenship, its membership. And make no mistake, freedom, when you say freedom, and you call it a slave race, you can mean nothing else but enfranchisement, emancipation. Look these terms up, folks. But it is just as true. Each of the other articles was addressed to the grievances of that race and designed to remedy them as the 15th. We do not say that no one else but the Negro can share in this protection. We do not say that no one else but the Negro can share in this protection. Hey, we didn't say this United States citizen thing is only for Negroes. Hey, what about you, indentured servants? What about you over there who are getting harassed by the landowners of your state? What about you who aren't getting fair wages? Come one and all, the Goyim, the Borg, the bourgeoisie, come to the United States. Sign your name, even though you're completely illiterate. Just put an X, that's all we need. Be a citizen of the United States. Get the same rights as the slave race. Oh, wait a minute. Get the same equal rights as all persons. Persons, yes. All persons have equal rights. Equal rights with the slave race. Yes, that's what you need. And you see, now all that really happened is that suddenly, when you go and you burn or hang a Negro, which, again, I don't mean to make light of that at all. Please don't take me wrong. I'm trying to expose this history, not poke fun or think it's funny. I'm really trying to expose this is our history. We need to face it and stop being a part of it. Stop supporting it. Stop being its members. Right? If you're not happy with the services you're getting from your gym, what do? Do you find another gym? Do you quit the gym? You go work out at home? What do? You quit, you become a state citizen maybe, you quit, you join a monastery, I don't know. I'm not trying to make light of this, I'm trying to tell you this is the truth of the situation. In a metaphoric way, basically all this meant is that you can no longer hang a Negro and use the word Negro as an excuse because it's now property of the United States, a slave, essentially, of the United States. And if you harm that property, you're harming what? You're harming its future labor potential. You think they give citizenship to someone and don't expect them to then work and pay taxes? No, you're killing now the property of the United States, the potentiality of human capital labor. And you're going to get in trouble now. See, don't you go hanging those Negroes. No, they're United States citizens. Now they have equal rights. They are persons with equal rights as your person. You see, and because you're a person, you're sanctioned, etc., etc., etc. So, come on, follow the lights. All are welcome. Come to the light. Come to the United States. We will give you benefits and equal rights. That is, equal rights to be punished under the law and extorted and exacted from. This is the history, guys. Like I said, I don't mean to make light of it, but what can you do? You see it for what it is. You can't. I can't take it seriously anymore. It's a fraud. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its power that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. In other words, they saw right through what these Masons were doing, and they said, oh crap, let's protect ourselves, screw the slave race, screw the commoners, but let's protect ourselves by adding these 12 amendments, which 10 got passed, or 8, something like that. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were a radical and unlawful departure from these principles, for they purport, at the behest of Congress, to bestow powers not contemplated by the founding law upon Congress. Oh, what does that sound like? What we've been talking about. Again, the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, as they're creating their new corporate structure in a foreign entity outside of the States United, were a radical and unlawful departure from these principles of the Constitution, for they purport at the behest of Congress to bestow powers not contemplated by the founding law upon Congress. That goes back to Patrick Henry. Where the hell did you get off saying we the people instead of we the states? Hey, something's wrong here. With the 14th Amendment, Congress declared itself capable of creating its own citizens of a class and nature unique and subservient to Congress itself. These amendments pertained solely to the non-white races and other artificial statutory quote-unquote persons who were and are subjects of the United States and not a part of the sovereignty. The 13th Amendment is a great extension of the powers of the national government. That's from United States versus Morris, 125. Federal Rep, 322, 325. How are we doing on time right now? I always lose track of time when I'm doing this. It looks like we're about out, actually. So, I could go on. This is all going to be in book number 2, which will have the same name, but volume 2, of course. All of this stuff is going to be lined up in a way that you can read it like a storybook. This is stuff we need to know. I've got so much more. The 14th Amendment does not profess to secure to all persons in the United States the benefit of the same laws and the same remedies. Well, that sounds different, doesn't it? That's Twining versus New Jersey. The 14th Amendment creates and defines citizenship of the United States. Wow. So it had long been contended and been held by many learned authorities and never judicially decided, to the contrary, that there was no such thing as a citizen of the United States, except as that condition arose from citizenship of some state. No mode existed of obtaining citizenship of the United States except by first becoming a citizen of some state. Most important to know is that last one that said Congress created its own class of subjects to be under it. Okay, that is not at all anything to do with the Constitution. This is a foreign corporation that we're being held under in a pirate cove that has stolen all of our lands on behalf of, quote-unquote, the frickin' people. This is your true history. You think you're going to change anything by voting? You think you're going to change anything? Why don't you look up and see who the private people in your state is? Why don't you look for these people and say, why are you allowing this shit to happen to your frickin' country, your state, your nation, and to us? Why are you not protecting us? You're the landholders. You're the ones that have the power. How many movies have you seen where there's one landholder, one corporation owner that controls the whole city? You think that's just a idea of Hollywood? No, that's the typical city. Every city is on private, well, I won't say everyone, but most cities are sitting on someone's private land. They don't lord over the city. The state does, but they do have the title. The state always carries the title because the state is the sovereign or quasi-sovereign, etc., and sovereign over the private people on the private lands, etc., etc., etc. So, anyway, folks, I don't care. I won't apologize if I've offended you today, because, again, I don't apologize for telling the truth. I don't apologize for reading congressional record. I don't apologize for ever causing someone uncomfortableness or political incorrectness syndrome because I'm speaking the truth. Like I said, there's plenty of other places to go besides UCY TV for that. This has been Red Pill Sunday School, Sunday edition, for this terrorist day of November 4th. If there wasn't an EMP, then I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. Keep it real, as Jesus tried to teach. Peace out.